Picture this. You're driving down a very lonely stretch of road late at night. The fog is very thick, the kind of fog that makes your headlights completely useless. Your hands are gripping the wheel tightly, trying to ensure that you don't skid off of the road. Your pulse is steady, you're doing everything in your power to stay focused. And then out of nowhere, something grabs the wheel from you, but it's not the wind, it's not a skid, it's hands. Big and strangely, very hairy hands. That, anyway, is the legend of Dartmoor's cursed road. Dartmoor, England is a place that has a very eerie reputation. Rolling moorland and scattered stone circles, and it's the kind of landscape that when you're in it, you can almost feel the ancient history surrounding you. And tucked away in this very isolated countryside is a very small stretch of road that drivers have been telling stories about now for a century. This stretch of road on what today is called B3212 is really nothing more than a 4-mile stretch of country highway way out in the middle of nowhere between two very tiny villages, if you even want to call them villages, of Post Bridge and Two Bridges. Aside from the very stunning beauty of the natural landscape, there's really nothing that stands out about this particular stretch of road. There's not many landmarks, there's no shops, there's no petrol stations, it's pretty barren. But time and time again, on this one particular 4-mile stretch of road, something terrifying has been happening. The first major report of this kind of incident goes back to 1921, when a man named E.H. Helby was traveling down this lonely stretch of road on his motorcycle. Now, with him on this particular day in the sidecar adjoining the motorcycle were the two small children of his boss, who he had taken out just so they could go on this joyride with him. There was nothing unusual about this particular day. The weather was normal for this part of England, but suddenly, pretty much out of nowhere, it seemed as though something had jerked the handlebars away from E.H. Helby. The motorcycle veers off the road and crashes into a ditch. Helby is flung from the motorcycle, he smashes into the ground, and he dies instantly. Somehow, the two girls were able to survive, albeit with some very serious injuries. And as they were recovering in the hospital, they started to report that something very strange had happened just before the motorcycle crashed. They both had happened to be looking at EH, probably he was saying something to them or some such, and as they were looking at him, they saw something rip the handlebars away from his grip, which is what caused the motorcycle to veer off the road. Now, the girl's parents and the doctors at first didn't take what the girl said seriously because what they were saying was so bizarre that it didn't make any sense. They said that what they saw was two abnormally large and abnormally hairy hands cover E.H. Helby's hands and then rip the controls away from him. Only weeks after Helby's crash, a bus was traveling down this very same stretch of highway when, seemingly again out of nowhere, the driver lost control and the bus ended up in a ditch. In August of that same year, a British Army captain was driving down that same stretch of road on his motorcycle when something happened that was becoming painfully familiar to the locals. He crashed his motorcycle, fortunately survived, but what he said after the crash was that he didn't skid off the road. It wasn't because of the weather. It was because of two massive hands covered in hair that ripped the controls away from him. And then in 1924, a couple of years later, an incident happened that proved you didn't have to be driving down the road to run into these hands. A woman and her husband had decided to go camping out in the moors just off of this stretch of highway. And they were going to be camping in their caravan, in the US we would call it an RV, in these massive rolling fields. The sun had gone down, it was the middle of the night, and the couple was just sitting up and chatting or playing cards and some such when they were startled by a very loud bang. It was a bang on the door of the caravan. Now, on the door, there was this little window, so they could see out, but it should have only been pitch black. But what the woman saw was a huge hand pressed up against the window, and it was hairy, almost like a gorilla's hand might be. The woman was stunned and she was frozen in place, But then she started to feel real panic when she heard that hand grab the handle of the door and start to try to get into the caravan. She didn't know what else to do, so she just made the sign of the cross and she started praying for protection. And when she started to do this, the hand just disappeared. They never saw it again. And the years that followed, more and more and more incidents came in, all of them very, very similar. Motorists saying that they felt or sometimes even saw these hands clamp down over theirs as they were clutching the steering wheel and start to try to rip it out of their control. Sometimes the motorists were successful in maintaining control, and sometimes they weren't. But most of them agreed that these hands were far larger than that of an average person, and also far hairier. Reports seemed to decline after the 1920s, but every so often they would crop up again. In 1962, a woman was traveling down the same 4-mile stretch of road and she realized that she was probably lost. So she pulled over and she got out her maps, which is what you had to do back in the day, and she starts trying to get her bearings. And as she's staring at her maps, she hears something slap against her windshield. She looks up and sees two gigantic, very hairy hands on top of her windshield. Of course, she screams and she panics and she puts the car back into drive and she peels off. And just as she peels off, the hands disappear, never sees them again. The most recent report that I could find of these hands comes from 2008, when a man says that he was driving down the stretch of road in his car when suddenly, just out of nowhere, he saw two gigantic, hairy hands over top of his on his steering wheel. And then they clutched the steering wheel inhumanly tight and they started to try to steer him off of the side of the road into a ditch. But he fought back. He fought with all of his might to try to keep control of the car, and eventually it was as if he was able to kind of shrug the hands off. So what's going on here then? Skeptics would obviously point to natural causes, that this stretch of road is pretty dangerous. It curves at different points, it's often slick, the weather's often bad, there's fog a lot of the time. So of course there's more accidents than normal. Now perhaps as drivers are going down this road, they're thinking about the legend of the hairy hands, and if they happen to have an accident, that's a traumatic experience. They're meshing their thoughts of this legend with their real life experience, and then they misremember hands ripping the steering wheel away from them. But a lot of people don't buy that. Maybe it's something supernatural. Maybe this stretch of road has restless spirits. Maybe there's a curse on it. Maybe it's something that goes back a really, really long time. Dartmoor's history stretches back to a time long before England was ever called England. A time even thousands of years before the Romans invaded Britannia. Traveling around Dartmoor's countryside, you might see stone circles, and you might see these large standing stones. These are remnants from a long ago age, a prehistoric age. Could something have happened all of those thousands of years ago that left a stain on that particular bit of land? If it did, it must have been something that was so strong that even now, all of these thousands of years later, it still persists. Even today, people who drive this stretch of road late at night, or even really in the daytime, say that they feel uneasy. Now, it could be just because of how isolated you feel out there and the fact that the weather is often kind of creepy, but it could also be something else. And while there hasn't been a reported sighting of these hands in a few years, the legend hasn't gone away. So, what do you think? Do you think that these hairy hands are nothing more than a legend that was born out of a particularly dangerous stretch of road? Or is there something darker in the fogs of Dartmoor? Something with hands strong enough to reach into your car and drag you off the road forever? Thank you for watching my spooky video. Let me know in the comments what you think, if this legend has some credibility to it, or if it's nothing more than a tall tale. I'd love to hear from you, but thank you for watching. If you liked my spooky video, please consider subscribing. because I got lots more spooky videos coming at you. Thank you. Bye bye.